Hi everyone, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be answering a very important question, and that is, does your level of English match your required CELPIP score? Unfortunately, many students take the CELPIP test or any really proficiency test, and they come out of the test feeling disappointed because even though they spent weeks or months preparing for the test, they didn't get the score they needed. And this causes a lot of frustration. Now, the problem could be because that student's level of English didn't match the required score. And so it's not just enough to learn about the skills and to practice taking samples at home. It's also important to ensure that in the very first step of your preparation, your level of English matches that desired score. So let's begin by looking at the different levels of English proficiency. There are 6 levels of English proficiency, which you can see here on the screen. So we have A1 or beginner, A2 pre-intermediate, B1 intermediate, B2 upper intermediate, C1 advanced, and C2 proficiency level. So you are, regardless of how much background you have in studying English or how long you've lived in an English-speaking country perhaps, your English proficiency can be mapped out and placed on one of these levels. And it's important for you to know which level you are currently at and whether that level of proficiency is enough for getting, for example, a CLB 9 or a CLB 10, for instance. Now, let's look at how these levels of proficiency translate to CLB scores or CELPIP scores, because CELPIP scores correspond to the Canadian language benchmark or the CLB level. So as you can see here, if you are at the A1 or beginner level, well, your level of English is so basic that it doesn't really correspond to a real score. It's anything below a CLB 4. But if you're an A2 or elementary level learner, the most possible outcome for you is most likely a CLB 4. If you're at B1 or intermediate level, you can expect to get a CLB 5. If you're at a B2 or upper intermediate level, you are most likely to get a CLB 6 or a CLB 7. So that's CELPIP score 6 to 7. But most of you and most people that I meet need a CLB 8 or above. So what if you need a CLB 9, which is one of the most common scores that students require? For that, you would need to have a C1 or an advanced level of proficiency. And if you're aiming for a CLB 10 or above, you need to ensure that your level is at least at the C2 or proficiency level. At this point, you might be wondering, well, what's my proficiency level? Where do I stand in all of this? Well, there are different ways that you can know your own level of proficiency. One way is to take a proficiency test. So if you have taken another test, such as the IELTS or the TOEFL before, and you prepared for that test, then your result will be a good indicator of where you stand. But the problem with taking sample proficiency tests to assess your own level of proficiency is that a lot of the time these proficiency tests have certain skills associated with them. And if you take one of these tests unprepared, your score is likely to be lower than where you actually are proficiency-wise. So for instance, if you give an IELTS test or a CELPIP test to someone who has never taken one of these tests before, chances are that their score will be lower than what they actually deserve to get. Why? Because they don't know the test skills and strategies, and that's going to affect their performance. But there's also another way to assess your own proficiency, and that is using some sort of online English proficiency test. And I recommend the EFSET online test. The link to this proficiency test is provided in the description. So if you want to check it out for yourself, you can follow the link in the description and spend 50 minutes of your time to assess your level of proficiency. Please bear in mind that this EFSET proficiency test only examines your level of reading and listening. And so because it's an automatically assessed proficiency test, it will not give you any feedback, nor will it even attempt to test your speaking and your writing, which are the productive skills. So if you want to be 100% sure that you are assessing all skills, then you might want to work with an English instructor who can tell you where you stand as far as those productive skills, in other words, speaking and writing, are concerned. But this test that you can see the screenshot here is an excellent way to start and get some idea as to your ability level in English. Okay, so now that I've figured out what my level of proficiency is, how long does it take for me to get to a higher level of proficiency? So let's take an example. Let's say you are required to achieve a score of CLB 9. And for that, you need to be at least at the C1 level. Now let's imagine that we're not at the C1 level. We are currently at the B2 level, and we need to improve our level of proficiency and reach C1. So as you can see in this table here, it takes approximately 200 hours for you to get from B2 to C1. Or let's take a look at another example. Let's say you have no background in English and you want to reach the B1 level. So you're going to spend 70 hours to get from 0 to A1, 150 hours to get from A1 to A2, and another 300 hours to get from A2 to B1. So you can add those hours up. These are the number of hours that you should spend in an instructional setting, that is, in a classroom. And so this will give you a rough estimate of how much time you should spend in order to build your proficiency for that desired score. Now, please also keep in mind that these are approximate numbers. It can vary from person to person. It can vary based on your first language. So if your first language is very different from English, if you have a different writing system, a different alphabet system, then you will have a more difficult time improving and building your proficiency. On the other hand, if you speak a language where a lot is shared with English, for instance, if you speak any Romance language like Spanish, French, or Italian, because of the similarities in roots and the similarity in the system of that language, then you will probably need to spend less time. So these are rough estimates. Please keep that in mind as you proceed and plan. Okay, so we figured out what our level of English is at the moment. We know what the target level is, and we also know how much time we need to spend to get there. So the next question is, how can I improve my proficiency? Now, like I said, the best way is to practice all 4 skills and to engage all of the skills and components by appearing in a classroom and working with a teacher. But there are also ways that you can build your proficiency at home through self-study. These include reading texts in English. So I would recommend starting with something that you are already familiar with. So perhaps a novel that you've read before and that you enjoyed, and now you would like to read that novel again, but in simplified English. There are plenty of options and titles available through various publishers, and by focusing on books that correspond to your current level, or perhaps one level above where you currently are at, you can achieve great results. So for instance, if I am at the B2 level and I want to improve my level of English to C1, then maybe I can start by reading a book at the B2 level and then gradually proceed to reading books at the C1 level. This is a really great way of improving your proficiency because you're already familiar with what the subject matter of the book is, and probably you're familiar with a lot of the details. So even if the level of English is a little bit more difficult than what you already know, you can fill those gaps with your prior knowledge. So that can really help. Another way is to follow the news on whatever topic that interests you in English. So for instance, if you are already spending time every day keeping up with current events, well, why not do that in English? Or if you're interested in music or movies or news pertaining to your favorite forms of entertainment, video games, what have you, you can follow that news in English. Again, because you're motivated to learn about that topic, because that topic or issue interests you, you are more likely to grasp the gist of what that message is and also learn a few new things along the way. Try to turn this into a routine in your life and you'll see that you can get amazing results from it. Finally, another way to build your level of proficiency is to watch and listen to podcasts and TED Talks. Obviously, TV shows, podcasts, TED Talks, these are really good ways of exposing yourself to English. And again, if the subject matter is related to your field of expertise, if it's related to your educational background, if it's related to something that just generally sparks your curiosity, again, this can be very helpful and can make your life a lot easier. So in a nutshell, what you need to do is you need to increase the amount of exposure that you have to English through reading and through listening and through watching and engaging with material that you're really interested in and that really makes you want to read more and spend more time involving yourself with English. However, again, I need to remind you that this is not enough, because English is not just about listening and reading. It's not just about receptive skills. You also need to work on your productive skills. Now, if you are fortunate enough to live in an English-speaking country, in this case, you can use your surrounding environment to help build your proficiency, because you're talking and interacting with others on a daily basis, which can be really, really helpful. But if you're not in an English-speaking environment and you don't have an opportunity to use English outside in the real world, then you still need to rely on classes, and a good instructor can really help you focus and expand all of the 4 skills. Now, once you've made sure that your level of proficiency is enough for the score you need, the next step is to familiarize yourself with the tips, tricks, and strategies involved in taking the CELPIP test. On my channel, I offer courses on preparation for CELPIP skills. Now, these courses are designed to be self-study material, and you can watch them at your own pace, and there are associated exercises. So check out the playlists on the home page of my channel, and good luck preparing for your test.